The heart monitor flatlined at 2:17 a.m. No warning, no countdown. Just one long, merciless beat cutting through the silence of Seoul General Hospital's private wing like a blade through still water. Every nurse on that corridor froze. Every nurse except one. Zora Ademi dropped her chart, shoved through that door, climbed onto the bed, and pressed both hands into the chest of a man she had never met in her life. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his face. She didn't know he was worth $11 billion or that his face had been on the cover of Forbes Asia twice before the age of 30. She just counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Out loud, calm, deliberate, fierce. The attending physician stumbled in 40 seconds later. The crash cart arrived at 55. But it was Zora, a 26-year-old Nigerian nurse on her third overnight shift in a row, running on bad coffee and the kind of quiet stubbornness that never photographs well but saves lives anyway, who kept Do-Yun Cha's blood moving until that defibrillator arrived. 3 shocks. The first one, nothing. The second, a tremor, a suggestion. The third, a heartbeat. Weak, ragged, uncertain, but there. The room exhaled. The doctor exhaled. The 2 other nurses who had rushed in behind the cart exhaled. Zora stepped back. Her scrubs were damp. Her arms ached. Her hands, steady through all 53 seconds, trembled for the first time now that it was over. She looked down at the man on the bed. He was beautiful, even unconscious. Sharp jaw, dark lashes against skin so pale it looked like it had never once been touched by consequence. The kind of face that had probably opened every door it had ever stood in front of. She had absolutely no idea who he was. She found out at the morning handoff, when the senior nurse leaned in and said his name the way people say names that are supposed to mean something. Do-Yun Cha, 29 years old, heir to Cha Global Industries, one of the 5 largest conglomerates in South Korea. $11 billion, 3 generations of empire. The kind of wealth that didn't just open doors, it built the buildings the doors were in. The nurse beside Zora whispered it like a prayer. Zora nodded, picked up her bag, and went home to sleep. She did not think about him. At least that is what she told herself. She was very good at telling herself things. Do-Yun woke up 3 days later. His eyes opened slowly, took in the ceiling, the monitors, the soft, filtered light of a private hospital suite that had probably cost more per night than most people made in a month. He blinked. He asked for his phone. His second sentence was a complaint about the lighting being too bright on the left side of the room. He did not ask what had happened to him, did not ask how serious it had been, did not ask who had been in that room when his heart stopped or what they had done to start it again. He simply reassembled himself. The way people reassemble themselves when they have never once in their lives had to be grateful for anything, pulled himself upright against the pillows, and moved on. Within a week, his fiancée had arrived from Paris. Sujin hands swept into that room like she had been rehearsing the entrance. Cream-colored coat, perfect posture. The kind of effortless beauty that other women studied and still couldn't replicate because it wasn't really about the face, it was about the certainty. The absolute, unshakable certainty that every room she walked into had been waiting for her. She kissed his forehead, said he had scared her, rearranged 2 of the flower arrangements without being asked. He smiled and said he was fine. And from the outside, from the doorway, looking in, they looked exactly like what they were supposed to be. 2 beautiful people from the right families, in the right hospital, moving smoothly toward the right future. Zora passed that room on her evening rounds. She looked in through the glass panel in the door. She was not looking at him. She was looking at Sujin. Because Zora had seen that woman before, not at a charity gala, not in a magazine. At the hospital parking structure, 2 nights before Do-Yun's cardiac event, getting into a car that was not hers. Moving with the relaxed ease of someone who believed they were invisible. Touching the face of the man in the driver's seat the way you only touch someone when you are absolutely certain no one who matters is watching. Zora stood in the hallway. She looked at the window. Then she kept walking. It was not her business. She was a nurse on a floor. These were not her people. This was not her world. And she had learned, the way certain people learn things, through experience rather than naivety, that stepping into the private arrangements of powerful families had a very specific way of ending, and it never ended well for the person with the least power in the room. So she walked, and she filed it away. And she went back to work. What happened next was, genuinely, an accident. 3 days after Sujin's arrival, Zora was covering a shift on Do-Yun's floor when one of his monitors spiked. A small irregularity, not an emergency, but not nothing. His private nurse had stepped out. Zora was the closest person. She walked in, checked the drip, adjusted the flow rate, noted the reading. Routine. Efficient. She was already turning to leave when he spoke. "You have a steady hand." She stopped. He was awake, fully awake, watching her with dark, attentive eyes that were clearer than she had expected. "Thank you," she said. "You've been in here before." "Yes." "Which time?" She set the clipboard down on the side table. "The first night." Something moved across his face, careful, deliberate, like a man deciding how much to show. "The doctors told me someone performed CPR, kept me alive until the crash cart arrived." "Almost a minute," she said. 53 seconds. He stared at her. She held his gaze, without any particular effort. "That was you." "Yes." He was quiet for a long time, long enough that she picked up the clipboard again, long enough that she thought he had decided to let it go, move on, the way people like him moved on from things that didn't require their sustained attention. Then he said, "What's your name?" "Zora." He said it back to her, slowly, like he was placing it somewhere specific. "That's not a name I've heard before." "It's Yoruba, West African. It means different things depending on who you ask." "What does it mean to you?" She picked up her chart, looked at him with the kind of expression that was not unkind, but was absolutely clear. "It means it's time for your 8 o'clock vitals, Mr. Cha." He laughed. It was sudden and genuine, and it changed his whole face, made him look younger, less assembled, like something underneath. The surface had briefly come up for air. She made a note on his chart and kept her face professional. But she heard it all the way down the hallway. Over the following 2 weeks, he found reasons to talk to her. Not in any way she could call inappropriate. Not in any way she could point to and say, "This is the thing, this is where the line was crossed." He was too careful for that, or maybe too genuine. She still wasn't sure which. He asked about Nigeria, what city she was from, what it was like growing up there. He asked about her training, about how she'd ended up in Seoul of all places, about what she thought of the city. She answered carefully, briefly, gave him the version of herself that was professional and pleasant and revealed nothing that wasn't already visible. But he kept asking, kept listening, with a quality of attention that she was not prepared for because powerful men usually listened the way they checked boxes. "Yes, I see. Interesting. Next." Do-Yun listened like the information mattered, like he was genuinely rearranging something in his understanding to make room for what she was telling him. It was dangerous, that kind of listening. She knew that. She was careful. But one evening, and she would replay this moment many times in the years that followed, she was sitting at the nurse's station at the end of a long shift, writing up her final notes, when she heard footsteps and looked up. He had disconnected his own monitor, wrapped his hospital gown tighter, walked down the hall, and sat down in the chair beside her station. "Mr. Cha, you cannot." "I wanted to say something." He said it quietly, not dramatically, just plainly, like a man who had been holding something for too long and had finally decided to put it down. "I've been thinking about it for days, and I didn't want to leave without saying it properly." She put down her pen. The station was empty. The hallway was still. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what it means that you were there, not in a sentimental way. In a real way, you didn't know who I was. You had nothing to gain. There was nobody watching, nobody keeping score, no reason for you to do anything other than walk past that room and let someone else handle it. He paused. But you didn't. Zora looked at him steadily. I've had people around me my whole life, he said. Hundreds of people. Employees, associates, friends, family, and every single one of them, every single one has had a reason. A position to protect, a favor to bank, something to gain from being in the room. He was quiet for a moment. I don't think I've ever had someone do something for me that was just because it was the right thing to do, because I was a person who needed help. The monitors beeped softly somewhere down the hall. She should have said something measured, something that gently redirected the conversation back to appropriate territory. Instead, she said, everyone deserves to be saved. He looked at her like she had said something extraordinary. Like it was a sentence he had heard before, in theory, and was only now understanding what it actually meant. You really believe that, he said. I do. Even people like me. Especially people like you, she said, because no one ever says it to people like you. He was still looking at her. She picked up her pen. Get back to your room, Mr. Cha. Your nurse is going to find that monitor disconnected and panic. He stood, slowly, like he was reluctant to let the moment close. Zora, he said. She looked up. Thank you for all of it. She nodded once. He walked back down the hallway. She watched him go, and then looked back down at her notes, and realized she had been writing the same word over and over without noticing. 3 days before his discharge, everything shifted. She almost missed it. Almost. Because it wasn't in the chart and it wasn't in the official record, and she only found it because she was meticulous, annoyingly, compulsively meticulous, about cross-referencing patient files when something felt slightly off. And something had felt slightly off since the beginning. She went back through the admission notes, through the pre-admission timeline, through the records from the weeks before Do-Yun's cardiac event. And she found it. Soo-jin Han had been at Seoul General Hospital the night of the event. Not visiting Do-Yun, not on that floor. She had been 2 floors down, in a private consultation room, meeting with the cardiologist who had been managing Do-Yun's care for the previous 3 months. The same cardiologist who had reviewed his stress test results 6 weeks earlier. The same cardiologist who had cleared him, in writing, unambiguously cleared him, for a high-altitude skiing trip to the Alps. The trip that had triggered the cardiac event. Zora sat with that for a very long time. She thought about the parking structure, the car, the man whose face Soo-jin had touched with the ease of long familiarity. She thought about the way Soo-jin had walked into that hospital room and rearranged the flowers. She thought about Do-Yun saying, I have never had someone do something for me with nothing to gain. She thought about the $11 billion. She thought about what she could prove and what she couldn't, and the difference between those 2 things. And then she did the only thing she could do without overstepping, without making accusations she couldn't support, without putting herself, a foreign nurse on a temporary contract, in the crosshairs of a family with resources she couldn't begin to calculate. She filed an incident report. Formal, factual, noting the overlap in timing between the consultant's clearance, the high-altitude trip, and the subsequent cardiac event, noting the presence of a named individual at the facility on the relevant evening, noting the professional relationship between that individual and a member of the treatment team. No conclusions, no accusations, just facts laid out in the order they occurred, submitted through the correct channels. She signed it, dated it, and she told no one. Because there was one more thing she had decided. She was not going to tell him. Not because she didn't want to, not because she didn't care, but because she had looked at this situation from every angle, and every angle led to the same place. A place where a 26-year-old Nigerian nurse who had been in Seoul for 14 months attempted to warn one of the most powerful men in Korea that his beautiful, well-connected fiancée might have played a role in nearly killing him. She knew how that story ended. She had read enough of them. So she filed the report. She trusted the system. And the night before his discharge, when he appeared at the nurse's station one last time and said he wanted to stay in touch, she said no. Mr. Cha. Dooyeon. She looked at him, really looked at him, and she let herself, for just one moment, feel the full weight of what she was putting down. That's not a good idea. Why not? Because you're going back to your life, she said quietly, and your life doesn't have room for what you think this is. You don't know what I think this is. I know enough, she said. Go home, be well, take care of your heart, and I mean that medically. He looked at her for a long time. She did not look away. And he nodded once and he left. 2 weeks later, Dooyeon Cha and Soo-jin had announced their engagement in every major Korean news publication. The photos were stunning. Zora did not look at them for long. She left Seoul 4 months after that. Her contract ended. A fellowship opened in Paris. She had always been someone who moved toward the next thing, not running from anything, just the kind of person who understood that standing still was its own kind of slow surrender. She packed 2 suitcases, said goodbye to the colleagues she had genuinely liked, took one last walk through the ward that had been her world for 14 months. She did not go past the private wing. Paris was cold and gray and exactly what she needed. The fellowship was brutal, long hours, impossible standards, the specific kind of humbling that comes from being good, and then discovering a whole new level of good that you haven't reached yet. She reached it. She always reached it. After the fellowship, she enrolled in medical school, not because anyone expected her to, not because it made any logical financial sense, but because she had stood in enough rooms watching doctors make decisions and felt, with complete clarity, that she could make them better. She specialized in cardiac surgery. She would tell people later that it was because of the complexity, the technical challenge, the extremely limited margin for error. She would not tell them about the 53 seconds, about the man on the table whose heart she had kept moving with her bare hands, about the way she had studied every diagram of the human heart in the years that followed with the specific intensity of someone trying to understand something that had gotten under their skin. She became Dr. Zora Ademi. Board certified, fellowship trained, published in 3 major journals before the age of 32. The kind of surgeon that other surgeons referred their most difficult cases to not out of defeat, but out of respect. She had a small apartment near the hospital, a large collection of well-worn medical texts, a group of colleagues she trusted, a life that was full and real and entirely built by her own hands. She did not follow Korean news. She did not search his name. She told herself she had no reason to. She was very good at telling herself things. 5 years, 3 months, and 11 days after she walked out of Seoul General Hospital, Dr. Zora Ademi received a patient transfer file. She almost didn't open it that afternoon. She had 3 other cases and a departmental review and a resident who needed feedback on a procedure note. She set it aside, made coffee, came back to it. Patient, Cha Dooyeon, age 34. Diagnosis: hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, progressive, stage III. Surgical history: none. Prognosis: without intervention within 6 to 8 weeks, fatal. She read it twice. She set the file down. She picked it back up. She looked at his name for a long time. Then she looked at the prognosis again. Fatal, not probably fatal, not high risk of fatality. Fatal. The cardiologists who had reviewed the case, 3 of them across 2 countries, had all arrived at the same place. The structural abnormality had been progressing silently for years, possibly from birth, and it had now reached the point where the heart was working so hard against itself that without surgical correction, it would simply stop. Her colleague knocked on her open office door. "The Cha transfer. You've had a chance to look." "Just now," she said. "They're asking for you specifically." She looked up. His team contacted the department directly, reviewed the case and the available surgeons. "They want you." He paused. "Do you know the patient?" She looked back at the file. "No," she said. Which was true. and was also, in the precise and careful way she had always chosen her words, not entirely the whole truth. "Schedule the consultation," she said. He nodded and left. She sat alone in her office with the file in her hands, and the Paris afternoon light coming through the window, and the name Dooyeon Cha sitting on the page in front of her like a question she had not finished answering 5 years ago. She closed the file. She went to see her 3 other patients. She did not sleep well that night. The consultation was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. He was late, not by much 4 minutes, but she noticed, because she noticed everything, and because she was already sitting at her desk when the door opened and he walked in and she had to make an immediate, private, and total decision about her face. She made it. He looked older. Of course he did, it had been 5 years. But it wasn't age exactly. It was something more specific. He carried himself with the same precision as before, the same contained quality, but underneath it there was something that had been through something. A weight in the jaw, a stillness in the eyes that wasn't peace. It was the kind of stillness that comes from a very long time of holding things together that keep wanting to fall apart. He sat down across from her. She watched his eyes move to the nameplate on her desk. She watched him read it. She watched his face. "Dr. Ademi," he said, slowly, like he was feeling the edges of something he wasn't sure about yet. "Mr. Cha," she said, "thank you for making the trip. I've reviewed your file thoroughly and I'd like to go through the imaging with you." He was still looking at her. "Zora." "Doctor," she said pleasantly, with a smile that was entirely professional and gave absolutely nothing away. He blinked. She opened the file. "Your condition is a structural abnormality of the left ventricular wall. It's been developing over a significant period of time, likely without symptoms severe enough to flag until relatively recently. The good news, and there is good news, is that the anatomy is operable. The intervention is high risk, but well within the scope of what we do here. Your previous surgical team was conservative. I think they were being overly conservative." "You think you can do it," he said. "I know I can." He was quiet for a moment. "You're the same person," he said. "From Seoul, from the hospital." "I'm a cardiac surgeon now," she said, "which is what matters in this room." "I remember you." She held his gaze. "What I need you to remember right now is the imaging on this screen, because the next decision you make about this is going to determine whether you're alive in 3 months." He looked at the screen. She talked him through it, all of it. The anatomy, the mechanism, the surgical approach, the recovery timeline, the risks. She was thorough and clear and precise, and she watched him receive all of it with the focused attention of someone who understood exactly what was at stake. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "I thought about finding you," he said. After everything, I thought about it many times." "Mr. Cha." "Sujin and I." "I'm aware of the public record," she said quietly. "I'm sorry for what you went through, genuinely." She paused. "But that's not what this consultation is about." He looked at her. "I need your answer on the surgery," she said. "Not today, think about it. Talk to whoever you need to talk to, but I need it by Friday because the window matters." He nodded slowly. "I'll give you my answer Thursday." "Thursday is fine." He stood, looked at her one more time with that expression she had not quite been able to name 5 years ago and still could not quite name now. "You became a cardiac surgeon," he said. "I did." "Of all the specializations." She looked at him. "Of all the specializations," she agreed, and let him make of that whatever he needed to make of it. He left. She sat in her office for a while after that, not looking at the file, not looking at anything in particular. Then she picked up her pen. She had 2 more consultations that afternoon and a surgery at 6 a.m. the next morning. She got back to work. He called on Wednesday, not Thursday, and not to give his answer. He called because there were things he apparently needed to say before he could let the answer simply be the answer. She took the call at her desk. "I'm agreeing to the surgery," he said. "That's settled, but before we move forward, I need to tell you something." "Mr. Cha." Please, not demanding, just asking, the particular plainness of a man who did not ask for things easily. Just let me say this one thing. She leaned back in her chair. All right. When I woke up in the hospital, he said, after the event, after everything, I was told what had happened. That someone had kept me alive. I was told it was a nurse. I asked for a name and I was given one, and then I put it aside. I put it aside because I was already in the middle of the next thing. There was the recovery and the press, and Sujin was there, and he stopped. I didn't follow through. I told myself I would, and I didn't, and by the time I thought about it again, it felt too late. Zora said nothing. I've thought about that a lot, he said. More than I've told anyone, because it tells you something about a person, the things they mean to do and don't do, the gratitude they feel but don't act on. What that means about who they actually are underneath all the other things they tell themselves they are. It means you are human, she said. It means I wasn't paying enough attention. She let the silence hold for a moment. There was a girl, he said, who sat next to me at a nurse's station at 2 a.m. and told me that everyone deserves to be saved, especially people like me, because no one ever says it to people like us. He paused. I have thought about that sentence, specifically that sentence, probably 400 times in the last 5 years, maybe more. Zora was quiet. I'm not asking for anything, he said. I understand this is a professional arrangement and that you are doing your job, and that is the most important thing. I just needed you to know that I didn't forget you because I didn't care. I forgot because I wasn't awake enough yet to understand what I was looking at. She looked at the ceiling for a moment. Thursday, she said. Come in Thursday for the pre-op blood work and we'll go through the anesthesia protocol. Bring someone if you can. Recovery is easier when someone is tracking the instructions alongside you. A pause. I don't have anyone to bring, he said quietly. Then I'll make sure the notes are thorough, she said. See you Thursday, Mr. Cha. She hung up. She sat very still. Then she got up, went to the window, looked out at Paris for a long moment, and said quietly to absolutely nobody, "This is extremely inconvenient." The pre-op appointments were professional. She was iron. She was procedure. She was every wall she had ever learned to build, assembled with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been building walls for a very long time and had gotten very good at it. He was careful. He showed up on time, early actually, all 3 times. He listened. He asked precise questions. He was not attempting to be charming or disarming or any of the things she might have expected. He was just present. Genuinely, quietly present. The way he had been at the nurse's station 5 years ago. She did not think about that. The morning of the surgery, she arrived at 5:45. She went through her prep the way she always did, methodically, quietly, the particular kind of calm that was not absence of feeling but its disciplined management. She scrubbed in. She reviewed the imaging one final time. She spoke to her team. Her first assistant, Matthew, who had worked with her for 3 years, watched her during the briefing and said afterward that she was different that morning. Not worse. Different. More precise, if that was even possible. Like someone who had decided something and was now simply executing it. She had decided one thing. This man was going to live. Not because of anything except the fact that she had taken an oath, and she was the best person in this building for this surgery, and she had never once let a single thing that was not the patient's welfare into the room with her. Not once. She was not going to start today. 8 hours and 41 minutes. That was how long the surgery took. 41 minutes longer than projected, because there was a secondary complication in the septal anatomy that her imaging had flagged as a possibility, but that revealed itself as a certainty once they were inside, and she adapted in real time with the kind of calm that her residents would talk about for years afterward. No panic, no hesitation, just the quiet recalibration of a surgeon who had built her entire career on the principle that the unexpected is only catastrophic if you treat it as something other than the next problem to solve. When she closed, her hands were steady. When his heart restarted, clean, strong, the rhythm clear on the monitor above the table, she did not make a sound. She stood very still for exactly 2 seconds. Then she said, "Good, let's close." Matthew looked at her over his mask. She looked at the monitor. The heartbeat held. He was in recovery for 6 hours before she heard he was asking for her. She was writing up the operative notes when her resident knocked. "The Cha patient. He's lucid and asking for the attending. Tell him the surgery was successful, and I'll be in for rounds tomorrow morning." 3 minutes later, the resident was back. "He's asking specifically for you. He'll ask for a lot of things in early recovery. The anesthesia." "He told me to tell you," the resident said carefully, "and I am directly quoting that he is not confused, that he understands you may not come, and that he would like you to know that this is not the medication talking." Zora put down her pen. She looked at the ceiling for a moment in the specific way. That meant she was doing arithmetic of a non-medical variety. Then she stood up. The recovery suite was dim and quiet. His color was better than she had expected. The monitors were steady. He looked like a man who had been through something enormous and had come out the other side, tired, hollowed out, and also somehow lighter, like he had put something down on the table and left it there. He opened his eyes when she came in. "You came," he said. His voice was rough from the tube. "I'm here for a clinical check," she said. "Of course you are," he almost smiled. She checked the monitors, checked the drainage, made a note. She was thorough about it, gave the process the full attention it deserved, and he lay quietly and let her work. When she stepped back, he said, "How long?" 8 hours and 41 minutes. There was a secondary complication we managed intraoperatively. You won't feel the difference in recovery, but it extends the timeline by about 3 days. "I meant, how long have you been in this building today?" She looked at him. "Since 5:45. That's 15 hours. That's a normal day." He was quiet. "You should go home." "I will." "Zora." She looked at him. He looked back at her with dark, exhausted eyes, and the full weight of 2 times she had saved his life, and 5 years of silence, and everything he had said on the phone on Wednesday. "Thank you," he said. Not the way people said it as punctuation. Not the way people said it to fill a pause. He said it the way you say something when you have been sitting with it for a very long time and have finally found the moment and the words and the person, all at once, and you are not going to waste it. She looked at him for a long moment. "Rest," she said. "You have a long recovery ahead." She turned toward the door. "Is there a version of this," he said quietly, "where someday, not now, not soon, but someday, you let me speak to you outside of a hospital?" She stopped. "Not as a patient," he said. "Not with a chart between us, just as 2 people." The monitor beeped steadily behind him. She stood at the door with her hand not quite on the handle. "Get some sleep, Mr. Cha," she said. "Is that a no?" She turned her head slightly, not enough to look at him, just enough. "It's a not yet," she said. And she walked out. The hallway was quiet and long and lit with the particular blue-white light of hospitals at night, the light that exists outside of normal time, and she walked through it steadily, her footsteps even, her hands at her sides. She took the stairs down. She collected her coat. She stepped out into the Paris night, cold, clear, the city going about its business all around her, and she stood on the steps for a moment, breathing. Somewhere above her, in a dim recovery suite on the 4th floor, a heart was beating. Steady, strong, alive. She had made it so. Twice. She turned up her collar against the cold, put her hands in her pockets, and walked home through the lit streets of Paris. She did not look back. But for the first time in 5 years, she was already thinking about what came next. And that, right there, is where we leave them. Duyun Cha, lying in a recovery suite in Paris with a repaired heart and the full understanding, maybe for the first time in his life, of exactly what it costs to not pay attention to the right things. And Dr. Zora Ademi, walking home through the cold Paris night, carrying 53 seconds of memory and 5 years of discipline and 2 words that she had chosen very carefully. Not yet. Not no, not never. Not I've moved on and so should you. Not yet. Because Zora Ademi had always been precise with her words. She had been precise with her hands and her charts and her surgical approach and her incident reports and every other thing she had ever done. Not yet meant something. The question is, what happens when yet becomes now? If you want to find out, you know what to do. Subscribe right now, because this channel tells stories that stay with you, and we are not done with these too. Drop your answer in the comments. Do you think Zora should give him that conversation? Is Do-yeon actually changed, or is this just another version of a powerful man deciding he wants something and moving toward it? Let me know what you think. I read every single comment. And if this story kept you here to the very end, please like this video. It tells me to keep going. It tells me that the long ones, the slow burns, the stories that take their time, those are worth making. See you in the next one.